Hey everyone, today we are ranking every single location or map in the Hitman World of Assassination Trilogy, which consists of Hitman 1 to 3, 2016 to 2021. Now for this we aren't going to be looking at any of the sniper assassin locations, as they aren't really playable in the same way, and it feels kind of wrong to rank them against the rest of the open world maps. The locations I'm ranking will only be the ones featured in the core World of Assassination story. Remember also, of course, this is just my opinion. This is going to be a list everyone has drastically different opinions on, so please share them. Drop a comment and tell me how you'd rank them yourself. Let's get into it. In our number 21 spot we have the ICA Facility. To begin at number 21 we have the ICA Facility. This is one of 3 smaller maps and appears in Hitman 1. This is technically 3 different locations, although it's all together under the same name. Now this is ranked as our lowest as it's literally just a tutorial, so there's not too much depth, and although this can be said for a few other maps, it's also quite visually boring and plain, which is fine, it's a tutorial after all. It's just to get you up to speed with the mechanics. I don't have much to say about this, nor do I want to spend time talking about it, but I thought I'd include it for the sake of covering everything. In our number 20 spot we have New Zealand. Honestly, this is probably the actual smallest location in the game that widely consists of large areas of sand and grass, with the only structure being the house in the center, which has quite a modern style to it. This is effectively a prologue to Hitman 2 and acts somewhat as a tutorial for the additional mechanics of things such as cameras. Overall, this level is fine and provides enough interest with its secret room, wall of weapons, and oddly chilling setting. Again, not going to spend too much time on these smaller ones. In number 19 we have the Carpathian Mountains, or Romania. This is my favorite out of the smaller locations, and I genuinely considered ranking it above some of the larger locations, but I thought that was going a bit too far. I really love this map. For its compact nature and linear structure, it is very engaging for a level that basically requires you to move forward through a moving train. I really love the variation in enemies, with heavily armored and almost juggernaut-like enemies to face, which smoothly transitions into strolling through the logistics area in a suit. There's nice little features also, like the construction of a new silence weapon out of anything that can be found along the way. There's also great elements such as the different one-use tools that can unlock boxes or open doors, providing you with more equipment or options. This level is simple but honestly just really enjoyable. In number 18 we have Paris. Paris to a lot of people is like the second but larger tutorial for Hitman 1, which is why it comes in here at our 18th spot, and as the lowest rated big map. My main gripe with Paris is its seeming complexity upon first arrival, its large surface area but little substance beyond what you get at face value. It's fun to explore for a while, sure, the grandiose nature strikes you, especially if you've only played in the ICA Facility up to this point. It wears off quickly though, as you realise there's quite a forgiving structure to this map, with heavily spaced out and separated areas that hand out disguises to easily be obtained and an abundance of accidents to easily cause, as well as the key to the level, Helmut Kruger, whose disguise allows you to go anywhere you please with no consequence as long as you're not holding a weapon. Now, all of those things I just mentioned aren't entirely bad, because this map is great for setting the player up for the next story map that occurs in Sapienza, where your hand is held far less. Paris is just that map that sets up what is to come and the possibilities. It has some great mission stories, ones such as the light rig breaking. Ones like this are a ton of fun to do as they change the flow of the map entirely. However, there's only so many times you can drop the light rig or walk the catwalk before it gets boring. The false complexity of this map can be summed up really by the mass number of fake NPCs who are unable to react to suspicious activity, with only a limited number being alive, as it were. This makes the level feel deflated despite its amazing environment and interesting premise of taking place at a fashion show. In number 17 we have Bangkok. I don't like Bangkok. I'd like to pin it on one thing, but I don't really know what that would be. I find this map pretty miserable if I'm being honest. Bangkok to me is almost like a more complex version of Paris. It's like Paris, except it doesn't provide you with any crutches or stabilization. This is fine, but the map alone is quite boring. It's not visually interesting aside the outside dock area and the ground floor reception. As it's primarily a hotel, the entire area is incredibly samey, which sounds obvious, I know, but it almost feels like this map needed another area to it, like a wider outdoor area or something. There's also a huge issue I feel in this map being split into 2 different buildings, which require you to go all the way to the bottom floor to pass between them, unless you want to do this through some kind of illegal activity like climbing on the ledges or going across the roof. Whenever I play this, it feels like I'm stuck in a maze of areas that look the same and feel the same, and they take ages to get to. It's just not fun in my opinion. With all this said, as there's some degree of difficulty, it becomes more engaging than Paris. There's some nice smaller areas that often feel far more interactive and engaging, and a bit different from the repeated hotel rooms. Another redeeming quality of Bangkok is that I think the targets are pretty good, and the mission stories are widely fun to play. It's not all that bad, but the structure of the map itself and the visuals of it also, I feel, are just very flawed and poorly organized. In number 16 we have Marrakesh. I feel like Marrakesh gets a lot of hate. I read up on a few different lists prior to this just to see the general opinion of it, and it was mostly hate. I think the map definitely has flaws. For example, the main center of the map feels like a bit of a dead zone, especially after you discover the underground tunnels. First off, I find the map to be engaging from the get-go as you're thrown into a busy market. As you move through the crowds and approach the building of one of your targets, you notice what is basically a mob standing outside chanting, with armed guards standing behind fences. From here you have to sneak your way in through many watchful eyes. Admittedly, this is quite easy, but even if you take an easy route, you are still required to make your own way into the main building. I like the main building a lot. It has some great opportunities. I find the layout quite pleasant and interesting. It's a nice orderly area which is contrasted with the faint chanting of the crowd from the outside. The large amounts of glass and windows also accentuates this as you walk around a modern building looking out onto the much older streets filled with crowds of angry people. The other area, the abandoned school, is quite interesting to move around, and it feels like every move counts and you need to be clever with how you use distractions or disguises, as a lot of the people there will see right through them, or the distraction will only lead one person away when two people are guarding an entrance. Overall, I like this area despite its simplicity. I also think the target is fine, and there's a couple mission stories and opportunities for accidents that make this area worthwhile. There's also the tunnel that connects the two, which I like a lot and I think compensates for the slight dead zone that is the map's center. In number 15 we have Colorado. It's hard to gauge what the community actually thinks of Colorado, but I feel it isn't as bad as it's said to be. I agree with the complaints of it being a little tedious due to having 4 targets and no safe areas to begin with. You require a disguise at all times to walk freely throughout the level. I personally enjoy the visual simplicity of this level, as I personally find the plainer and I guess more regular looking environments to be more engaging. This place is just a simple farm which is filled with tons of weapons, explosives and more. I guess I like it because it's a little different, a little more dense and chaotic. A misfire can lead to a barrage of bullets in seconds. So the density of armed people can be interesting and often more punishing. I also find the targets to, although feel quite similar and maybe a little over the top in the personalities, to be a lot of fun to interact with. I think often the more over the top characters are the more interesting ones. There's also some good mission stories between them which will allow you to do stuff like use a battering ram, and also more subtle things like simply speaking to the target to get them secluded. Each target mostly has a different section to the farm. I would say the main house is probably the most interesting area due to its tight corners, density of people, but also abundance of different things for cover and tools to traverse throughout without being seen. It's physically a small area, but a lot fits into it. I also enjoy the ending of the level, which requires you to print a copy of a target's face in order to access a secret room. I like stuff like that. I think the main thing for this level is that the map itself is pretty great, but the mechanics or the way the map flows as a whole can feel a little clunky and restrict freedom of approach somewhat. In number 14 we have Hokkaido. This is a map that I originally really loved. I greatly enjoyed the restricted nature of this map. The disallowing of your loadout makes this map quite unique and feel all the more challenging. After a while though, I came to find this to be quite restrictive, and honestly it got a little boring. A little tedious to play this map. In order to basically access the free play mode, you have to reach the highest level of mastery, which just kinda sucks. I feel like it should have been nearer the level 10 mark. It also feels like everywhere is locked doors with typically only 1 or 2 ways through, most of them consisting of coming in through the outside, which is fun to do, but it's also nice when there's a slight wider variety of options. I'm really not a fan of the targets on this map either. I kinda feel like they might be the most boring on any level, mainly due to the fact that we have a target who's entirely still for the duration of the mission. Again, this is a really nice concept, but it wears off quickly once you've done most of the planned approaches to taking this target out. Although throwing a heart into a bin is really cool, there's only so many times it can be done before it gets boring. It feels like there's a whole section and whole target which is far too restricted. A restriction is good when it's challenging, but not so much when it just straight up stops you from doing certain things and approaching the target in a certain way. With all this said, Hokkaido is a visually beautiful map, and all of the areas are incredibly nice and interesting to explore, especially due to the contrast of bright and light areas above to the darker underbelly which holds up the polished resort above. Again, visually it looks great. I also think the map as a whole and its layout is quite impressive and well constructed, but it's just the sheer amount of locked doors and inaccessible areas that can become a nuisance. It's a great map, especially upon your first few playthroughs, but I find its replayability to be limited beyond this. In number 13 we have Mumbai. Mumbai is one of few Hitman locations that isn't overly vibrant or filled with colour. Everywhere is quite grey and cluttered aside the set on top of the in-construction building. Even that is in some degree of disorder as it's under construction. This map has the issue of being far too big, I feel. It's nice to have larger maps, but Mumbai is honestly huge both in terms of surface area but also its verticality. There are so many streets, so many people, so many individual rooms to explore. This map is honestly kind of insane. There's upsides to it however, as it feels like one of the most alive maps in all three games. You feel like you're always being watched and you always have to check around before making a move, which makes the gameplay interesting. The thing with the mass amount of areas and rooms is that they're all actually quite unique and have interesting and dynamic layouts. It's a huge map but still somehow cluttered and filled with endless amounts of things to interact with. It's a very dense experience. There's also one of my favourite additions to this map, which is locating a target instead of simply knowing who it is. I found this to be an interesting idea as you have to pass by a few different people before it's correct. I don't know, it's something different, I like that. This map also houses one of my favourite mission stories where you assist another assassin and help him to align his shots to kill your targets for you. It's really cool. Overall, Mumbai is impressive, but in many ways it can feel a bit overwhelming and drawn out despite its density. In number 12 we have New York. New York is a very cool and quite stylized map that takes place in a bank and has you both eliminate a fairly typical target but also rob some intel from a bank vault, or alternately steal multiple smaller hard drives from 3 different higher ranking people. There's one standout reason this map isn't higher, and that's because I think it has a ton of wasted potential. It does the whole bank idea well, but I don't think it does it to the extent of what it could be. I've always felt like the actual opening of the vault is far too easy and can be accessed by simply unlocking a few doors and clearing out a single room, and then you're in. Visually the map is great, the layout is great also. There's some rooms and halls that feel a bit lifeless and empty, but generally this is just due to the high ceilings and the marble everywhere that makes everything look very grand and unfitting for just a few people. I like the target in this mission a lot, and I like the different ways you can approach her. The entire atmosphere and different sections that are created within the bank are all executed very well and make the level feel immersive and alive. This is also a really nice one after a lot of big open spaces with the in-your-face colors from the rest of Hitman 2. The bank has a plain but pleasant color palette. This map may honestly have one of the best designs in terms of room layout and such. Everything flows very nicely, I think. I like where restricted areas are and are not. I just can't help but feel a bit more could have been done with the vault in particular, even though it's still probably one of the best non-elimination objectives. In number 11 we have Colombia. Colombia is a location I really wish I could like more, but a huge thing that kills it for me is the ridiculous amount of running that has to be done. I often get so bored going from one end to another that I'll just end up shooting people on the way to have something to do, other than just slow jog over to where I want to be. It's a shame, as Colombia is incredibly beautiful and a really nice change to the typical Hitman map, as it occurs in a heavy amount of greenery and large outdoor areas, but ones that aren't particularly dense with crowds like a lot of the others. A big reason why I like this map is that it almost feels like you get 3 in 1, and there's events you can cause in one area that will have no consequence in another. The environment of this map is so beautiful though. There's such a nice atmosphere to each area, so many little secrets within the dense greenery, and small little paths that can help you to traverse between the different areas. Of course there's also the signature hidden cave area which houses a submarine too. Go to the mansion and you get big rooms of money, golden guns and chrome-plated cars. Contrast that with small shaman huts, quaint and humble townspeople, and nice little cafes. There's a really nice clash of normality against the clearly large criminal presence. Going back to the map effectively being 3 different maps, it fits well as there's basically a target for each section, and again this is a map where I like all 3 targets. They're all quite unique and engaging and fit their different area very well. If there wasn't so much running, Colombia would be higher because the map has so much to offer. A bit like Mumbai, its size works in its favour, as it's not just large and empty, it's dense with small little details and things to find. Sure, there's long roads, but these work out as a breath of air between the different sections of the map. In number 10 we have Chongqing. Out of all the Hitman 3 locations, Chongqing has the best ambience and immersion. As soon as you spawn in on the bridge overlooking the city, it leaves you just amazed. It's a place that, although it feels quite grey, is also vibrant despite it. The thin falling rain, the neon signs, and the clash between old and new technology. The outdoors is great, but I'll be honest, I found the underground lab area to be quite plain. It felt like it should have been guarded a lot more heavily, especially based on the rundown we got of this place's importance and the key information it held. It almost feels like a few well-trained people could get in if they wanted, I just felt a little underwhelmed upon going down there, only to see it was a small circular area with a small circular room in the center. I think it's good though that you don't have to access the files for replays, as that was one of the weakest parts of the mission as a whole. And that's my only gripe though with the level really. I like the targets, and the main above ground city area is a ton of fun to move around in, climbing buildings, going through back streets, finding an interesting way to get from one route to another. There's a lot of complexity to the layout, but despite it seeming this way, it's also very ordered once you know where you're going. It's one of those maps I appreciate because it feels like a regular city, except with some dodgy stuff going down within it. It gives the impression that you should always be looking over your shoulder, looking out for shadows. Visually stunning map, and one which left me insanely impressed upon playing it in Hitman 3. In number 9 we have Vermont or Whittleton Creek. This one I get the feeling is going to be a little controversial. Having gone through the Hitman subreddit, this seems to be quite a polarizing map. A lot of hate but also a lot of love. For me it's a map I really love, and I've honestly restrained myself somewhat from putting it any higher as to not discredit the other maps. This map just gives me such great feels when I play it. I love the whole concept of it. I love that it all takes place in a simple and quaint town. It feels so relaxed, so refreshing from the pressure that can be felt on the other levels. I just love the idea of taking out a target when across the street a huge party is happening, balloons are being blown up and hot dogs handed out. The whole idea of that I just love. The thing that Hitman does so well as a series, I think, is having those moments of controlled chaos whilst normality is happening in the room along. This map for me does that perfectly, and I love it for it. In general, this location is just very pleasant. It's visually very appealing, it has a simple structure, similar but unique buildings, mainly within the interior where you can find out the character of the person that lives there. The targets can be boring sometimes as they tend to stay in fairly similar areas, and they patrol a fairly tight area also, but this is no issue when you find fun ways to take them out, like using fumigation or putting explosives in mole holes. The map is a guilty pleasure to me, and I understand why it's not everyone's thing, but for me it perfectly encapsulates the key reason why I love Hitman. Having small levels of absurdity and providing plenty of opportunities for those moments of controlled chaos as you sneak throughout suburbia. In number 8 we have Maldives. This location to me is like the fun playground before the dark descent into the third chapter of the trilogy. This feels like a literal well-deserved holiday where you can just have fun and explore an exotic island. This map has a familiar structure with 3 core areas and a central hub which connects them all, allowing for the map to feature different areas without feeling too disconnected. For each area it also has a different target, all of which are relatively interesting and have different and interesting ways to take them down. This map has so many areas that are interesting to explore. A bit like Colombia, there's a bunch of little pathways, secret doors and stuff like that. The main draw of this map for me still is just the visuals. It's just so bright and nice, the turquoise water, the white sand, and a personal hut provided for the duration of your stay. This map also has really cool dynamic elements such as a storm that rolls in as you progress through the level. This feels almost like the looming storm that is to come in Hitman 3. Which makes the map provide all the more entertainment as it feels temporary. I don't have an excess of things to say about this map, it's just one I really enjoy. It feels like it's simply here for the purpose of fun. In number 7 we have Dartmoor. To oppose the white sands of the Maldives, this map has quite a nice, quaint calmness to it. It feels incredibly atmospheric with a feeling of something not being right. There's an unnerving presence on this map that makes you feel on edge despite the location seeming so much lighter on security than recent chronological locations. This map has a relatively simple layout and is effectively just a large manor house with surrounding fields filled with various buildings like the church and the greenhouse. Although the main building is effectively just a simple 3-story square, it's got a lot to it. There's a lot to the inside with a multitude of secret rooms, small puzzles, and a range of different scales in size and shape, making the house all in all an interesting experience to explore. It's probably one of the better indoor areas in the 3 Hitman games. There's of course a nice change of pace also in its inclusion of a story where you get to play detective, locating and discovering clues which can lead to multiple different ends, including making the target take themselves out. I found the secondary objective of locating the files to also be quite enjoyable. Overall, the thing that carries this map is the character, and literally the characters. We get what is effectively a full cast of relatively fleshed out characters, which is something we don't really have for many other maps. Dartmoor impressed me because it felt like an experience, and one that was different from the usual style in a unique but enjoyable way. In number 6 we have Dubai. Dubai is a map I had a pretty horrendous first opinion on, honestly, as the first time I played it, which leads you on a very linear and quite boring path to kill both targets, locking them into a singular room. I had to leave the map alone for a bit and return to it to get a fuller experience. This map is visually impressive beyond the extent of any other map I'd say. I heard this map alone took over a year to craft and put together, and honestly I'd say it really shows. This place is amazing to be in. Every area feels vibrant and engaging, as everything surrounding you is just so huge and constantly leaves your jaw on the floor. The targets are kinda but the different ways and methods of taking them out can be a lot of fun. There's something about this map's ability to have so many different and interesting areas that I find so amazing. There's so much to explore on the outside of the structure as there is the inside also. You really can't beat the feeling of scaling the outside of a skyscraper. I'd also like to mention that the general structure of the map has a very nice layout. There's ways to get to places quicker despite the map being large. It's actually quite contained and orderly once you figure out your bearings. In number 5 we have Mendoza. Mendoza to me is a nice combination of the best elements of the best maps. It has this really nice feel to it where it truly feels like a send-off to the trilogy as a whole. This map is both very calm but also very exciting at the same time. The main area of the map consists of a large party with sizable gatherings of people who are drinking and dancing. The main focus of the map is wine, with a large space taken up by its vineyard and its huge room filled with, I'm not sure what the name for this thing is, it makes wine. There's also secret passages and lots of locked doors that require some sneaky techniques to get into. This map to me is like Isle of Sgail, except in a Sapienza setting, and it's a great combo. The mission stories are also creative beyond the usual stuff, and incredibly huge events like spilling huge amounts of wine across the floor of the distillery, press, whatever it looks cool is the point. There's also great ones where you can get a nearby sniper to take your target out for you. There is also of course the addition of Diana to this map, which makes it all the more dynamic and just makes it more interesting to be honest, as you feel you need to be a bit more careful with the moves you make as you're not the only one it could have an effect on. I like both the targets too. I love the whole story that takes place within the underground boardroom where one target kills another. That whole building in fact is really great, with a cool sandboxy room in the attic, where you can play around with a bunch of different weapons. This map is great and ticks every box for me when it comes to a Hitman map. In number 4 is Miami. Honestly, Miami has never been one of my favorites for a long while. I found it to be far too busy and cluttered. It felt like too much stuff was going on. So after I returned to this map a year later, I was pleasantly surprised to find that this massive content was incredibly fun. The map is probably the most vibrant one you're going to get out of all 3 games, and it provides such a range of different areas which are all incredibly interesting to explore and interact with. Another big bonus is the characters, honestly. There's a lot of little parts of this map where you can find these strange, eccentric people, which can provide for some of the best disguises. The main draw for this map is the fact that there's a live race going on as you progress through the level, with one of the targets being a participant. This is a really interesting concept and changes up the dynamic of how to approach them. This map does what Hokkaido did poorly by allowing the stationary target to not literally be stationary, and also allow this target to eventually come out of their loop, either forcefully or through waiting. From the labs all the way to the bustling stands, there feels like so many opportunities to make interesting things happen, and I really can't stress enough how well designed both visually and structurally this map is. The way it's broken up and its makeup of areas make it so there's never a dull moment, and it allows you to play so many different roles with some great mission stories. In number 3 we have Berlin. This map I find to be the perfect contrast to maps like Sapienza, Mendoza and Maldives. This place isn't bright or colourful in any corner. It comes through here and there in small neon bursts, and it's amazing for it. I love the design that IOI did for this map, and I think it's the perfect place to hunt down ICA agents. The core area of the map, the club, is constantly dulling your senses with its booming music, forcing you to stay twice as attentive than usual whilst being in twice the amount of danger as you're surrounded by an unknown number of targets whose locations you don't possess. This is furthered by the dark lighting and cluttered spaces, forcing you to blend rather than hide to locate each agent who's hunting you. There's also nice back areas however, with vents to walk across and pipes and ledges to climb, making the club not feel too restrictive. The fact it's underground also adds so much weight to it, making you feel trapped within a big concrete prison with what you've been told are some of the world's most dangerous agents. I just want to mention also that this level has some of my favourite disguises. I really like the range and creativity of them. The first playthrough of this in the story definitely takes the spot of being the most impactful out of all the locations, especially with the additional area out by the bus stop, as well as the short trek through the woods, which is nothing short of chilling. I love this map, and I think it's a great playground to hunt down the huge amounts of targets. There's no better feeling than hearing the handler panic through the headset as you take an agent down and prove yourself to be the apex predator. In number 2 we have Sapienza. In my opinion, Sapienza is incredibly overrated. With that said, it's still this high up despite that. Sapienza in my opinion has one of the best structures, with 2 separate areas above ground and also below. Above, you're tasked with taking out 2 targets, and below you need to disable a bioweapon. This creates an interesting duality within the map and makes the whole endeavor far more engaging. I feel like the missions where you're tasked with something in addition to a target are always the better ones. Sapienza gets it right here, where something like Whittleton, not so much, as it often doesn't feel too tedious to repeat the destruction of the bioweapon. 2 targets and an interesting side task is the perfect combo for me. Sapienza has a range of stunning areas and is capable of having a large map but having every area feel filled with something interesting and engaging. It's another big map also that doesn't feel too bad to get across. Often you'll traverse across the whole thing without even realizing. It has such a nice flow to it. The only area I feel can be somewhat obsolete is the back streets as well as the church. It feels like the main focus always pulls you to the mansion, despite the other areas being a lot better to explore. One little thing I love about this map too is the ICA safe room, which is like a mini room that gets you set up with some gadgets and weapons before you venture out. I don't know, I wish they'd do that more. This is the map that everyone knows is good, and hey, it is. In our number 1 spot, we have the Isle of Sgail. This may be a controversial top pick, but to me the Isle of Sgail encompasses a true pinnacle to Hitman, serving as a highly exclusive area surrounded by powerful people. The first time as you arrive, you step out onto the dock to look up and see the castle towering over you. This map is also great because it blends together so many different types of structures. There's the older, more archaic structure of the castle, but within it there's these huge bars and dining areas. You then have the far more modern structures such as the large glass cube that sits atop a tower, adding a nice contrast to the rest of the building. The only disappointing part of this map in my mind is the targets. Both of the sisters are relatively boring honestly, although their backstories are fairly interesting. They don't feel as unique as many of the prior targets, and the methods of taking them down are hit and miss. In the primary story there's also the escorting of the Constant from the building, which past the first playthrough can become a little tedious too, although it is optional so I suppose it doesn't matter too much. Another huge benefit to this map is the range of great looking disguises and mission stories that allow you to play the role of billionaires and such. I could tell I was going to greatly enjoy this map as soon as I stepped foot on it, and it's got to be the one I have replayed the most due to its amazing visuals, great structure and general design. Well, that's it for the list. I want to thank you all for watching, and as I said at the start, please do drop your own thoughts and rankings down below. Thanks, and goodbye. An additional thank you to LHPL3 as well as my other members for supporting the channel.